Thank you so much, Sarah. I am very honored to be here today and to be able to talk to all of you as it relates to building a resilient newsroom. And Dr. Harris gave some great information that is really going to serve in terms of our overall well-being. And I look forward to talking about what that looks like in terms of a newsroom perspective, but then also the dynamics of really what a resilience looks like and what a resilient newsroom looks like. So let's get started talking about really the value of ally. And I usually always start with a quote, but this time I wanted to start with an image. And I thought this was really a great image. It was very timely. It talks about the value of ally, but what I love so much about it is that it says ally is a verb, really, right? In terms of an action, the state of being. And I love this in terms of the fact that sharing allies are more than just to survive. Allies are to help people thrive. And so I think that's the value of really the importance of allyship, and also, to be very honest, the value and the importance of resilience. So let's talk a little bit more about allyship and really what it means to be an ally, right? So we know that it is a verb, right, in terms of action. But I will say this, Power Shift Project has done a wonderful job, and specifically Jill Geisler, in addressing this topic. I highly recommend, if you haven't already, to actually go to the Freedom Forum Institute, their website, and look up some of the great work that Jill Geisler is doing in this area. And what we're going to do is we're going to actually utilize her definition of what an ally is and really what that means. And really what I really value about Jill is really her place in the industry in terms of being an executive and the great work that she's been doing in terms of training as it relates to newsrooms. And she actually speaks about allyship as this: an ally is a trusted force for good, which is really an important indicator as it relates to the importance and the value of ally. And the essential elements are really trusted, force, and good. So that speaks to the value of allyship. But really, to talk about it even more at length, she's done a phenomenal job in terms of creating this really great checklist of giving us indicators as relates to what allyship means, what we can go about, and what it looks like. And what is also really important to share is that an allyship, or being an ally, is something that is really, I like how she says, it's not simply isn't a hero. An ally is a helper. And so within this checklist, she talks about the value of your knowledge in terms of allyship, what you do know about the historic and the issues related to inequity. So it's really important to build your knowledge base. And if it's something that you're still learning, this is a wonderful opportunity to really be able to dive in and to learn. Your willingness to listen and to be open-minded, right, in terms of that learning process, in terms of getting to know others and what that looks like. Your unselfishness, right, in terms of understanding this topic, and then also being able to gain the trust of others as it relates to allyship. And then also your track record in terms of supporting others as it relates to these life experiences, not only from your own, but really who may lack the advantages and privileges, right, that you may enjoy. So if you're a person on this call that's thinking about what can I do, allyship is a great opportunity to start thinking about what you can do in terms of the action of being able to serve. And as she mentioned, that allyship is a trusted force for good. So I also wanted to share some of the great work of other scholars. And Dr. Jacob McWilliams and Darrell Boyds talking about the differences between allies, accomplices, and advocacy, I think is extremely vital and important. Just like Jill Geisler, they talked about how an ally acts and speaks on the behalf of really a marginalized or disadvantaged person or community. And that they also stress that it's not something that you claim, it's something that you receive, right? It's really that act in terms of doing. And the difference between that ally and then the accomplice, right? Their conceptualization are those who are in solidarity of the marginalized group, really actively working as it relates to the cause. And I love what they shared in terms of accomplices, because they said accomplices are those who find really kind of linked arm in arm in the streets as relates to that cause, bringing attention to the cause, really kind of formulating as part of the cause. And the difference between that accomplice and as well as an advocate, which we really talk a great deal about. The advocate, they said, actually, they actually conceptualized it as not as risky, but the advocate is someone who supports a person or community because of the work that they're doing, being in a position of power. And they kind of conceptualize that as maybe a person who's a director of an organization, who's keeping within the mission of that organization. That's about the advocacy of that group, right? So as we can see, the differences between the ally, accomplices, and advocacy, and really as it relates to what these different entities or individuals, or maybe even organizations, can do in terms of serving as relates to a cause. So understanding those dynamics are important, but then also understanding how well-being at work can really serve you. One of the elements happens to be in my area, which is positive psychology, and how positive psychology can really help and serve in this is because positive psychology is about the scientific study of strengths and optimal human functioning, and it enables individuals and organizations. Remember when we, at the beginning of the talk, talking about how allies can help you thrive? Well, positive psychology is about helping individuals and organizations thrive. The movement is about sharing more science with a mass audience, really applied science to really help you have a more meaningful and fulfilling life. And within that, resilience fits very perfectly within the dynamics of positive psychology. And resilience refers to how we kind of negotiate adversity to kind of maintain our well-being. And also, it's the psychological process of how we kind of draw from our strengths, right? Positive psychology is really a strength-based approach, and resilience is really how we kind of leverage and lean on our strengths in terms of us adapting to challenges. Dr. Harris talked about the value of resilience and how we are that resilient group, right? But then also it speaks to the value of how we bounce back. So resilience really focuses a lot on how we go about bouncing back, but then what are those individuals? What types of individuals are resilient individuals in terms of doing so? And that's another value in terms of positive psychology, is understanding what that looks like and how we can continue to leverage that. So when we're looking at the values of resilience at work, right, in terms of really the importance of it in terms of the workplace, in positive workplace relationships, a resilient worker really helps in terms of the achievement of success within either the individuals within that workplace or the organization. And they are a team player. They're a person that values and believes in a kind of a win-win approach, right, in terms of the value of the organization and what they can continue to do to not only really help the organization, but really looking at the value of individuals that make up the group. They believe and value and build strong connections and relationships with individuals. They're active listeners, which is a very important dynamic. They're people that are very open-minded, highly also empathetic, really individuals that understand the value of perspective taking, and understanding the importance of really making sure that they're present and being mindful of the individuals that are part of their team. So there's a lot of different great dynamics to the value of being a resilient worker, but also really having the culture of resilience in the workplace. So there's a prescription, literally, as it relates to the value of resilience at work. And these scholars have come up with really a phenomenal kind of grid, so to speak, as it relates to what that prescription as it relates to resilience at work looks like. I will kind of briefly discuss them, but really start to dive in a little bit more on how it can really apply in terms of newsrooms and the importance as relates to the industry. Of course, positive attitude is very important, having that optimistic frame. Role models really serves, right? Because I think that's another important indicator of being that presence, but then also modeling, looking at what some other organizations are doing is important in terms of facing fears. So if your workplace that's welcoming in the importance of resilience, right? It's certainly about facing what's going on there. It's not about kind of hiding and ignoring and being silent, right? It's really making some noise and facing it. Understanding coping skills, which Dr. Harris talked about a little bit earlier as relates to her presentation, but understanding the importance of those coping skills. Resilient workers really understand the value of not only making sure that they're serving their teams, they understand the importance of serving themselves, that they're nurturing as relates to their own self-care, as well as making sure that they are kind of serving as active participants within the organization. Also, supportive networks. It's important to have that component within developing a resilient workplace. We're going to talk about that in a moment. Training is also important. So this call is, is really phenomenal in regards to the fact that all of you are here and you are really actively participating in terms of making sure that you are giving yourself all that you need, right, in terms of maintaining and building and developing your self-care. But also the regular training within organizations is also very important, that more organizations begin to have conversations like this one, right? And training like this one in terms of an executive level as well as the entire organization to really be able to develop these skills of valuing a resilient workplace. Then also signature strengths. Within positive psychology, there are 24 value and action character strengths that we utilize and leverage within the field. One of them happens to be courage. I think there's a great sense of courage in regards to having a resilient workplace. I also believe is a great sense of courage for an individual who becomes an ally or accomplice, right, and is doing advocacy. There's a great level of courage in all of that as it relates to the value of resilience. So let's talk about a little bit about what this may look like within a news organization, right? We already talked about that prescription, so to speak, as relates to resilience in the workplace. Within a news organization, social support can play a very important role in terms of workplace resilience, guidance and support during times of stress, especially as relates to nurturing those relationships. Remember, it's about making sure that we're having a level of compassion at work. During the first call, I talked about the value of compassionate news organizations and how that will really serve. Well, also that speaks to that in terms of the value of creating these support systems within organizations and coming from the top, and then also within individuals within the newsrooms as well. Then also remember that resilient employees are able to manage stress effectively, like all of you are doing on this call in terms of finding out what you can utilize and leverage to help kind of maintain your well-being. That's also a really great indicator in regards to being able to manage your stress, but then also actively taking part in self-care to kind of nurture yourself, as well as being able to nurture others within your organization. I will tell you this, when I was a news director and I did a fellowship with the National Association of Broadcasters, I think one of the best advice they gave me was when it came down to thinking about how to be effective leader for your team. And one of the things that they shared was, when you're on the plane and you're talking about, getting that mask on, and if you want to help other individuals. Well, the first person you need to put the mask on is for yourself, right? To be able to serve the other individuals that are part of, the plane. And so it's so important to make sure that on a management standpoint, managers are making sure that they're taking care and doing self-care, but it's also very important in terms of the organization within all the dynamics of all the individuals to make sure that you are nurturing your well-being. Remember, that is really your most important job is regards to your health and your well-being. So let's take a look at another component that will serve in terms of building a resilient newsroom or news operation. I'm sure many of you have heard a lot about emotional intelligence. We're strengthening emotional intelligence, really that emotional insight will allow an awareness of a full range of emotions from negative into positive, right? Because understanding your own intelligence level as it relates to your emotions is also ideal in terms of being able to understand others around you and the reactions and the actions of others, and also the social cues of others. Also in terms of understanding how to be empathetic, how to effectively communicate. And so all of this is very important. And as well as the fact that dealing with levels of emotional intelligence is dealing with a level of self-awareness, and then also understanding the value and the importance of trust, right? Because that is also very important as relates to how to go about building relationships within an organization. It's hard to have people really feel safe without building a level of trust, right? And so that's also another important component. I will tell you this, doing some of the research as relates to thinking about how to construct a resilient newsroom, I came across some great work as it relates to allyship that I thought would be ideal in terms of bringing in terms of the value of emotional intelligence. And one of the elements was, in terms of allyship, they talked about speak up, but not over. I think that also speaks to a level of self-awareness, right? Is individuals understanding, especially if you're trying to be an ally within an organization, is the value of speaking up, but allowing individuals to share, because remember, a big part of that dynamic is a level of learning and being open-minded and really getting to know. So another essential component in terms of building a resilient newsroom. So this is a third one, and that is, once all of these different dynamics are constructed, right? These are some of the main dynamics in terms of thinking about a newsroom, and then also the prescription of how to build a resilient workforce. It's important that we do a follow-up, a debriefing, right, in terms of these sessions. And I think that's also important, not only on an organizational level, but it's also important on an individual level. As you're going through elements of self-care and thinking about all the things that you're doing to nurture yourself and creating hopefully some level of balance, or thinking about how to go about building resilience within yourself and then your team, you want to go and be reflective. And this is the moment where you can look back and see not only how, if you're a manager, how an employee coped, but then if you're an individual, well, how you kind of weathered the storm. What worked, what didn't work, what can be done differently, kind of some lessons learned, and then also giving an opportunity to develop some action, really, and kind of a solutions-oriented approach in terms of developing some action plans as relates to what needs to be done and what is working and what can be constructed to really build a solid, resilient organization. So with saying all of that in terms of building the resilience as it relates to your team and yourself, right? Remember some of the tips shared earlier, but then also just reiterating some of the tips that have been shared in previous sessions, especially if you happen to miss it, but the importance of the value of self-care. Remember, in order for us to be able to serve others, we have to kind of, make sure that we're exercising levels of self-care. One of my mentors said something that I always remember. I'm always thinking about my cup. She says, Kortni, you want to give from your saucer, not your cup. Meaning, if I'm doing due diligence in terms of my own self-care and I'm filling my cup, right, then I can give from my saucer. But if I'm giving from my cup and it's looking a little empty, that means I need to go and be reflective and think about what I need in terms of my own well-being. These are some things for you to keep in mind. Power down. You may find yourself needing that time to remove yourself, especially as if you're dealing with levels of racial stress, right? And you, in order to kind of handle it, you might need to be a little reflective and to power down for a moment. Also think about positive activities, things that are going to really increase positive emotions. In the past, I've talked about the value of gratitude and practicing gratitude, and because it allows you to be reflective, but it also allows you to be present. Then self-compassion, thinking about what you need and the importance of that. Remember, because it starts with self, and that's in terms of an individual standpoint and a management standpoint. Positive relationships. Dr. Harris talked about the self-care squad. Guys, it's so important to be able to have that and identify people who truly are people that are positive, right? Because what you don't want is to have someone that's a part of your self-care squad that lacks empathy, lacks certain levels of compassion, and then you find yourself, feeling maybe worse than you did when you initially spoke to them, right? So be very selective in terms of qualifying positive relationships. Be mindful. So eat mindfully, sitting mindfully, breathing mindfully. All of these elements are important in terms of having a level of mindfulness, which means when you're out covering a story and you find yourself, I used to do this a lot. I found myself kind of throwing down food and not having a chance to really enjoy it. But now as a happiness scholar, I understand, no, I need to sit back for a moment if I have that time, right? Some moments are different than others. Sitting, making sure that you're thinking about your levels of even breathing is also important in terms of the practice of self-care. Self-guided meditations, I will tell you this, I live on YouTube, and mostly because of the fact I love that when you're searching for knowledge, and you can find so many things out there from various TED Talks with other experts sharing expertise, and then you will find great self-guided meditations as well. It's a great resource to be able to be present. The other day I was extremely stressful, and I said, okay, I need to start meditating. Started meditating for about 45 minutes, and my mood shifted. So think about these different mindful approaches as it relates to how to go about practicing self-care. Dr. Harris talked about the importance of exercise and movement is really important in terms of burnout. Research supports that in terms of kind of working through the stress cycle. And then meaningful experiences. So think about the things that serve you, and it looks different for all of us, right? And so that's one of the reasons why I always say, welcome to having a social experiment with your life, to understand the dynamics of how to go about looking for things that are about positive emotions, understanding the various levels of well-being, but then thinking about what works for you, right? I just told you something that really works for me, that's meditation. Well, find out and something that works for you, and don't be afraid to kind of experiment to see what that looks like. So I'm going to end it on this note, and this is the importance of a quote that I really think will really serve us all, and that is, when we learn how to become more resilient, we learn how to embrace beautifully broad spectrum of human experiences. Guys, I hope this serves you in terms of not only embracing your own human experience, but then all those who are there who are thinking about becoming allies, accomplices, and the advocacy work that you're doing in terms of really creating change to make a difference. Please make sure, no matter what, that you're thinking about what you need as relates to your self-care and really your well-being.